Watch! All right. Welcome back, everyone, to the second watch. We are happy to see everyone. We have a special guest, DM Blackwall. We'll be getting him in here in just a few minutes. We just have to do our usual first few minute routine here. Gary, how you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. I am doing okay. It is Friday. My kids are gone. All of them are gone. I won't see them till Sunday. Wow. My oldest is in Vegas for WrestleMania. He's 14.
A wrestling fan, I take it.
I guess so. Yeah. Either way, it's a great weekend. I've been looking forward to this. It's going to be a good night. Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing a lot better. Last night I had a great time with your game, The Row. Maybe I had a little too much fun because I was Lent was over, so I got to have some bourbon, and I had one too many, I think. But it was fun. We had a good time last night. But we don't need to talk about my nascent alcoholism. I just wanted to do a
I
little.
was so proud of you.
I was proud of me too. But all right, before we get started here, we want to remind everyone that we're trying to grow the channel. So please hit like, subscribe, bell icon. If you're on Rumble, follow, let people know. It's the late show on Friday. Okay. You're watching Max Leal, you're watching Tenkar, you're not ready to go to bed. Come on over to the second watch, pour yourself a drink and have a good time. I want to give everyone a heads up. You know, VentureCon is happening, VentureCon 4. He's got a special guest, Sandy Peterson, July 18, 19, and 20. It's $100 for the weekend. It's totally worth it. Diversity and Dragons is going to be there. I'm going to be there. Sandy Peterson's going to be there. A lot of people. It's just a fun, small con. Please consider going. Disco Barbarian, I see that super chat. Don't worry. I'll get to it in just a minute. But I got to do a little shilling for myself because I don't do enough of that. Wretched Folklore is up, and finally Lulu. It's $19.99 for the physical copy. It's almost 100 pages. It's Weird West horror stuff for your Western games. Originally written for the Wretched RPG from the Red Room, but it'll work with any OSR system. I also have a blog I finally got done. It's about hex flowers, Gary, and how to use them.
I'm fucking so excited. You don't know. I've been like, man, I hope Matt finishes his hex flower essay.
But I actually think it'll work for. I do. Anyway. Please check it out.
I think it's going to be great. I am going to read it. I'm sure it's good.
Well, I had already figured you're not going to. I just figured you weren't going to read it. But anyway, thank you.
Oh,
yeah. Hex flowers to run your factions in behind the scenes while your players are doing other things. And finally, Better with Bacon asked me to do a video with him. We'll be recording that on Monday. Hey, Bacon, I saw you in the chat. Thanks for the invite. We're going to talk about game mastery stuff and some of my views on what game masters do when they're sitting at the table. So looking forward to that. And so when that video is up and running, I'll let everybody know. You should go to Better with Bacon, subscribe to his channel. Not just because of me, because he's a nice guy. So, all right, enough about me. Tonight's about DM Blackwall. Let's get him in here. Hey, man.
Hey. If I had applause, I do have applause.
Do we?
Oh, never mind.
It doesn't work. Okay.
I don't.
So, Blackwall, thank you so much for showing up and talking with us. We really appreciate it. I know you've been making the rounds, and so you got to be kind of exhausted because you're trying to adjust to everyone's sleep schedule, especially ours. So how you been?
I've been good. Rather like you, I had an evening with too much bourbon a day or two ago, which was a mistake. However, I Nate and I have also been working hard on our next game, which we're hoping to have out in ready to be out in April of next year, probably actually out in June or so. Which is a sci-fi game. So right before this, I was just working on rewriting the rules for how to repair starships. So
Nice. Disco Barbarian, $5. Thank you so much. Yar, dog brothers and sword sisters. Time for the watch. I had it. You got it, as we said, on the boat. Looking forward to hearing more about Horde Wars. Well,
cool.
It's perfect topic because the author's here.
What are you trying
thank you,
to say, brother?
Thank you so much. All right. Let me get this back. So what we were kind of talking about before you came on, Blackwall, is, we like talking about game mastery, and we wanted to chat with you about game mastery and some of the things that influenced you, got you into the game and things like that, and
Sure.
kind of get to know you a little bit better. So what was your first game and when did you start gaming?
I mean, for RPGs?
Yeah.
Well, I think it'd be second edition D&D.
Okay.
And that was, let me think, probably 25 years ago or so, maybe a little more.
That means you're old too. Yep.
What? So you started with 2E.
Yeah.
Any particular game world? Or was it like homebrew?
No, it was basically just dungeon delving. I mean, I was in high school, and the friend who was running the game it was basically just like complete random dungeon generation, which occasionally resulted in some really weird things, like finding a black dragon in a room that it couldn't possibly get into because it's the size of the door.
Right. right.
That kind of thing.
Who was it that got you into the game?
Well, I was interested in it because I read, and certainly when I was younger, read a lot of the fantasy and sci-fi genre, and so I liked that stuff. And I was like, oh, here's a game where I can play it. And before then, I was playing war games, and I kept playing war games until, I don't know, I kept playing war games for a while. I don't play them much anymore because often I don't have the time, and also a lot of modern war games require a significant investment of time and money.
Yeah. I used to play a lot of 40K back in the 90s, and it's sad because 40K had such a great, I don't know if you played 40K, Warhammer 40K, but it had such great lore and it was really immersive. Like if you picked up one of the splat books about one of the armies that you could play, it was written in such a way that it was like from its perspective, so you got into it. And if whatever themes of that army appealed to you, like you almost identified with it. And there was so much shit talking between the armies and the fans of one army versus this, and it still exists today. But man, I sort of feel like I get it, they need to make money, but it got kind of prohibitively expensive, and I think a lot of people.
It has. Yeah, and I do buy Warhammer miniatures occasionally when I can get them at a steep discount, but I do that specifically to make game pieces for our games, for when I'm going around to conventions or when we are doing proof of concept work. So, for example, we're not Blackwall Games is not a miniatures company. We write and sell game rules. I think we may have a novel at some point as well, but we're not producing game pieces. We're relying on the existing stuff. If you want to play our game with miniatures and stuff, you'd be buying from other manufacturers. So we want to make sure that there's a miniature, at least one, ideally more than one, from multiple manufacturers that can stand in for our monsters or for our characters. And so for the sci-fi game in particular, that's challenging. And so I've been using 40K parts to kit bash with other manufacturers' miniatures to make example models of some of the aliens, just as proof of concept to go, all right, can I make this physically without too much effort? Because if so, our customers can too. And I've done that whole process also for our for Horde Wars, where we have some unique monsters that don't exist in other games. And we're like, all right, how hard is it to get a miniature for this? Because if people want to play with them, we want it to be possible.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. So I guess, as the name implies, Horde Wars. I mean, we've reviewed the book. We've read it, and so is this like well, I guess from your perspective, were you intending miniature use, or was it predominantly theater of the mind, or what was your, I guess, design in that regard?
Sure. In person, I run about half and half, theater of the mind and with miniatures. At conventions, almost entirely with miniatures, although it helps draw people in who aren't actually playing. They'll see what's on the table, so that's just better for sales.
Yeah.
And then
Well, it's just more
online,
attractive when you're trying to bring people over.
Yeah.
It just looks better.
Online's more theater of the mind, but if you're ever if we get the chance to play at North Texas RPG Con, I think that'll be fun. But there should be miniatures there for that, for whatever scenario you guys wind up playing in. But in general, I like playing with miniatures. I just don't always have the time to invest to get them set up ahead. And we also wanted the game to support theater of the mind. And so currently, I think about probably half the games I run are entirely theater of the mind because I'm running them online. And I've used Owlbear now and again, but I don't generally use a virtual tabletop at all. I don't think that is terribly useful for most of the time, or rather, it incentivizes the wrong thing. What I want to incentivize is people to go play with their friends in real life, not online. I'll play with you online, like it can be fun, but it's not the best way to enjoy role playing games.
I tend to agree with you. Although necessity is sort of the mother of invention, especially in this hobby, when I think a lot of the people are online, like yourself, like Gary, myself, we're like game masters. So we're interested in all the new stuff that our players our in-person player groups, I think they're fine with the standard IP. Right. So trying to get them into like, hey, I want to play some Lion and Dragon from RPG Pundit. They're like, huh? What is that? I'm not interested. So online play is sort of like necessary, right? But you're speaking my language with virtual tabletops. I cannot stand them. I just cannot stand them.
Well, I don't think anybody's come out with a good one yet. I think they've come out with, can it do these things? And they've never really thought about doing it from a game master's. You're in the game and there's just not one of these days there will be a good one. We'll all use it. We'll all think it's fine. We won't think twice about it. Just not here yet.
Maybe.
I see that chat you've got up.
Yeah, I was about to read it. Ultra American, $5. Thank you very much, man. Played in Horde Wars Chariot Death Race on Wednesday. My character was able to race and win without taking any damage or making any attacks. Talk about luck. You got Chariot Death Races in your game?
Yes.
That sounds awesome. Tell us about it.
So we have a people group called the Easterns, who are disunited, but broadly speaking, they're a country of their own. They are heavily influenced by the Picts, although we have added chariots pulled by war bulls. Now, the Picts did do this, but they didn't use them in the way we intend them to be used, which is ramming into the enemy, as compared to, say, stopping and getting out and going to fight. That's what they were mostly actually doing. We went for a more fantastical approach. And a decent chunk of their tribes are also headhunters. So you don't want to lose. They will not take captives. There's 2 of the tribes will, and then they'll just work you to death in a tin mine. But for the rest, it's losing is death. So one of the scenarios in the book that we offer for the Eastern area is a chariot racing competition where a king of one of the tribes of the Easterns is offering one of his younger daughters as a bride to whoever wins, as well as a pair of new war bulls as a gift. And so the players on our Gilded server, a number of them participated in this race. And yeah, Hunter managed to win barely by maneuvering his chariot and evading attacks. He was not mostly attacking. I think he might have done one attack. I think actually he might have done one, but he didn't. He basically just focused on avoiding getting hit and getting as far ahead as he could. He was behind for like 3/4 of the race, but managed to pull it off.
Wow. Awesome.
And as per the name, I think of the, we think it was 4 or 5 player characters plus 6. Of the 10 or 11 participants in the race, half died.
Jeez.
I just love that. I like it when players die. I'm sorry. I'm the GM that will admit it. When your player dies, it brings me a little bit of joy. It just does.
Player character, you mean?
Player character. Yes, player character. Not
oh, no. We have everyone sign a waiver when they play with us.
Occasionally, though, you do have to set an example at the table, right? You just gotta.
Well, it was funny because the player characters didn't. I mean, they mostly survived because they were racing against NPCs as well. But it was interesting because unlike what is typical, they were attacking each other, right, and screwing each other over. As well as the NPCs. The only alliance really was between one of the NPCs and one of the player characters because they were from the same tribe. And so they, who were competing for this woman's affections. And so they helped each other and had made an agreement prior to the fight or prior to the race. But other than that, it was a free-for-all.
That's cool.
I'm curious because, well, no, I think I mentioned this before we started the stream. I have not had a chance to really get into the details. I've skimmed things and looked over Horde. I haven't had a chance to play. So my questions are as somebody new coming in, But it seems like from what I gather, it's almost like you designed the game thinking, well, two things. One, it reminds me of Dynasty Warriors. We've got like one dude fighting off whole armies, right?
Mhm.
And I don't know if you ever played that video game, but the other is like, did you start with the intention of having sort of a faction domain? Like, how important was that at the beginning, the PvP aspect of the game? It seems like you kind of,
Well,
that was the seed almost, right? Or is that just what happened?
so I think player characters fighting each other probably isn't or shouldn't be the norm in these kinds of games, but it can happen, and sometimes it should. If there's a real conflict between their goals, or if you're playing with, say, 30 players in the same campaign setting who have different goals for their characters. Especially if those players each have more than one character. You're going to have conflict, and you should have a system that can handle that, right? But but if you have a small play group of like 4 or 5 players, and just you running the game, probably then you don't want too much PvP as the norm. That's not
for sure.
optimal.
But with the the domains and stuff, it just seemed.
Yeah. But the idea, though, I mean, our very first playtest was about 40 goblins against 5 player characters as just a free-for-all battle to see how it went. And the players won, though barely. I think 2 or 3 of them were bleeding out when the battle ended, but they did win, and that told us we were on the right track. Also, because we got the battle done in like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, so it moved pretty quickly.
Was that with miniatures? Was that with miniatures? Was that with miniatures?
No, I don't think that one was, or maybe the players had them, and I just used some dice to represent the enemies. But yeah, no, that playtest let us know that we were on the right track. That this was fun and could play quickly, and and then we spent more time, obviously, playtesting after that. We had in total probably about 100 playtesters for basic, and nearly 200 for advanced.
Wow. That's
in
lot.
part because some of our basic customers helped test out stuff from advanced before it came out.
Well, and I'm trying to remember where you were on another podcast. It may have been when you were on, was it Arbiter of Worlds? I think you had talked about you guys have a Living World campaign going on the guild. Okay, so your game seems kind of, I mean, that's what I mean is when I say it seems designed for that kind of thing. Whereas, I think the only other game you can say that for is probably Axe 2, right? For that kind of play. How does that work? Like, how complicated does that get for you guys? How many players do you have?
We wrote a much more, I would say, streamlined rule set for that compared to Axe.
Absolutely.
Because we want the game to play quickly. We're not as interested in accounting as as a few of his customers are.
I love that game, though. I love that game, though, dude. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. I don't think I'm smart enough to run it, but I do love it. I'm going to steal every idea from
Macrease doesn't even use those rules. I asked him on the stream, and he was like, and he basically said he uses the simplified economic rules when he's running. It's because he had customers and players who wanted the more detailed stuff that it's in the book. Now, even then, his simple version is still more complex, I would say, than ours. But it's, I mean, I've been playing with domain play of some kind or another for pretty much the entire time, certainly the last 20 years or so of playing
and
different
that's something
RPGs.
I was going to ask you about that, because I don't think most modern players really have experience with domain play. And I also think that coming into role-playing games from a wargaming background, while that was common at the founding of the hobby, right? That's kind of the reverse of what happens these days. How did that happen for you? Like, what was it? Who got you into wargaming? How did that happen? Because it's also it's almost a more traditionalist way to be introduced to the hobby, right?
Yeah, well, I stumbled into war games via the internet and just finding them in stores. Like, I live in Michigan. There were war games for sale at a local Meijer, which is equivalent to like Walmart or something. They were also for sale at actual game shops, and so I bought like a starter kit, opened it up, looked at the rules, and was like, oh yeah, I get how to play this. I think my brother was my first opponent, and then I had some friends in school who were also getting into that or were already into it, who when they found out that I'd started playing, they were like, oh cool. So it kind of just happened organically, because it was something I was already interested in, something I was already doing when I was younger in some form, whether with like micro machines or Lego or what have you. You'd be playing out some battles, and this was just doing it in a more codified way. So it wasn't a big leap. I was awful at painting at the time, though. I'm significantly better now.
I think that's the reason I stay away from war games. Like, I'm going to make a confession. I've probably painted 2 or 3 minis in my life, and they're horrible, and I've walked away. I'd have been like, nah, dude, theater of their mind all the way, bro.
I always relied upon it. And my in-person gaming crew, they got into Warhammer 40K alongside me. I'm actually kind of the reverse. I started with RPGs and then started doing war games. But I always relied upon the 3-foot rule. If it looks good about this far away, it's fine. Of course, if you get close, my eyeballs are all skewed.
I don't. I either don't paint the eyeballs. I'll use like a wash in it, or I will paint them a single solid color. And I do that in part because painting eyeballs is just a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Unless it's a big model, like something like a beholder or a dragon, I'll actually paint the eyeballs on. But for like a person who's like an inch tall, that scale of miniature at any distance, you're not going to see the eyes at all. And so I prefer something a little simpler and quicker rather than fighting to paint a detail that no one will appreciate, even if I pull it off well.
Exactly. And my friends make fun of me for this, and I'll, even when I die, when they're around my casket, they're gonna probably make fun of the way I painted miniatures, because it's just been, I still, to this day, we haven't played a war game in like years, and I'll still get the occasional meme where they're making fun of the eyeballs or something. They're like, "Oh, this looks like Matt's Space Marine Army."
Now, one other thing I did want to mention, though, is for Horde Wars, it is very much a points of light setting, and this incentivizes player characters to cooperate outside of town, because basically the setting is dangerous and you could die. If you go wandering off in the wilderness alone, you actually almost certainly will die unless you're very, very skilled or very lucky. But so there are reasons in the setting for caravans to exist, for adventuring parties to exist, for mercenaries guarding caravans to exist, because without that, most of them wouldn't make it, and certainly couldn't make it like as a living. Even if you made one trip successful, you wouldn't make the next. And so that I think really works well for what we were talking about with our larger kind of living world games, because the players, even when they have conflict, tend to focus that conflict around domain actions or moments when they are not on an adventure. When they're on an adventure, it is fairly rare for them to go after each other, at least the experienced players, because they know death could be around the corner.
Right. Yeah. Just kind of talk a little bit about the PvP and the domain play. I'll invoke the Bro SR. Do you think Horde Wars would, I guess, fit their style of play?
Oh, we got a few Bro SR guys who are playing, and who've bought the game. I don't know if he's ready yet. I think Scootifer has a copy. I could be wrong. I think he has one. I've played with Thundermoose in person, along with a few of the bros who came up with him. They came to my apartment and we gamed.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So
very cool.
So I think there's some. I think they could certainly play that way. I will say that the one-to-one time is the opposite of what we recommend in our game system. We recommend what would be in that same type of language 4-to-1 or 12-to-1 time. We recommend having a month go by in the game world for a week in real life, or a season go by in the game world for a week in real life. The reason for this is, of course, that things like castles and cathedrals took a lot of time to build. They do in our game as well. And of course, if you play a long-lived species like a dwarf or an elf, that character, if all goes well, will outlive you at one time.
Right.
You know what? I am so glad that you brought that up, because 1-to-1 time seems to be a friggin' lightning rod on social media.
It is, bro.
And it drives me nuts, because like, if you look at the rules cyclopedia, they flat out explain flex time, and it makes so much I don't want to say more sense, but it makes sense as an option. So it's really nice to hear a game designer actually defend something more like that.
Well, it's not my idea. You'll find the same idea in Birthright, actually. They tell you to and that's specifically for domain play, but the Birthright setting, they tell you to do a month between sessions or a season between sessions.
Yeah.
See,
well, go ahead.
I'm in the midst of like putting together a 1-to-1 time game. Just to see, right? Just to experiment. I want to start it. I want to run it for as long as I can run it. And I did, once again, I watched you on Macreese's podcast, and I heard you talking about like 4-to-1 or 12-to-1. And I'm just curious, how does that work? Like with so many players, how many players do you have in a game where your time is, it just seems a little complicated. Like it seemed like it'd be easier to do 1-to-1 with a lot of players.
So let me give you a I'll give you two examples. The first example is for like a Living World campaign. I have a couple of those going on. I have an in-person one that I'm slated to continue in a couple of weeks. There's a convention or two of a group of like 20 or 30 guys who get together, abandoning their wives and children for the weekend, and we basically take the time to play games together. And the Horde Wars games from last year have created a living world that we're then going to continue this year at the same convention, so that the players who got positions of power, or who got magic items or whatever it might be, or whose characters gained experience, will continue those same characters and in those positions. And so for that particular one, rather than matching real life time, because of the nature of we're getting together like once or twice a year for like 4 days straight, right? And so in that case, what we're doing is we're having a month go by between game sessions. And so we might play in the morning for 4 or 5 hours, and then there's a gap for lunch, say, and then a month has gone by, and then we're in the next session. And so they can do kind of domain actions between sessions. Now that's a really compressed way to do it, but it works pretty well. Another example is in the sci-fi game that we're working on. We've got active play testing. The characters are paid, most of them are soldiers, are paid by the month. And so having and traveling to another star system usually takes months, or in some cases years. And so having a month or several months go by between sessions actually directly helps play the game, where you're like, okay, we have defeated the enemies here, we're going to travel to the next star system. That's going to take, say, a D4 months, depending on the distance to that next star. All right, we're going to go there, and then between sessions you're getting paid and spending that money and doing any domain type things that you might want to do, and then you're back in the adventure the next time. But it's less important for like a small group of like five player characters. It's much more important to have this kind of timekeeping for a group of 10, 20, 30, 100 players, some of whom may have multiple characters. Then strict timekeeping is much more necessary, I would say.
I think I'm lucky that I get to recruit from Matt's server, and there's a lot of active game tables. Like there's probably a game going on right now for all I know. So, I'm fairly certain that I'm going to have a decent player base. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with that. I'm going to assume it's going to succeed until it fails. Then we'll see what happens.
Well, the other thing to watch out for when you try 1-to-1, and you'll see some of the Bro SR guys writing about this, is that it doesn't scale at a certain level of power for a character. Depending on the game system you're playing, you're going to have stuff that you want your character to do for weeks or months, and so then you just have to switch characters. And even if you're playing a couple, you may have multiple characters down, and so they at a certain point, I've read some of the articles they've written, listened to some of the things that they're saying. At a certain point, I think that can work really well for a party of adventurers going from dungeon to dungeon or town to town in a setting. I think it doesn't scale well once you become the local baron, or once you have taken a wizard's tower and made it your own, or once you've become the leader of a band of mercenaries. I think at a certain point you need to speed up the downtime.
I agree with you on that. I've experimented a little bit, and I played in a Bro SR game a year or so ago. 2 years ago, was it? I don't know. Broriental Adventures. It was a controversy, apparently. But anyway, I thought it was cool while being a part of it. But I was prognosticating into the future about how is this going to work as like my low level characters? Because I was also playing a patron. What's going to happen? And I started seeing a lot of what you're talking about, and I think at the end of the day, and maybe you agree with this, maybe you don't. I think what facilitates the game itself to keep the table coming to the table, the players coming and getting involved with the characters and wanting to play, I think ultimately should be the deciding factor, whether you use like quote unquote flex time, one-to-one time, or these interesting little things that you're talking about here, 4-to-1, 12-to-1. I think that ultimately should be the guiding factor, with respect to what you're doing, setting up a campaign, whether you're playing Horde Wars, D&D, or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, it's not my idea. Like those two ratios, the description might be my idea, but the a month or a season going by between game sessions, or being linked to real life weeks, month or a season, that's at least 30-35 years old in published material, and I think it's older than that, but it's at least 1991 and probably earlier. So it's not new, and so it's really interesting to occasionally, when I get into one of the more abrasive, generally younger guys, who go, well, like, right, try it and give us play reports. And I'm like, then you'll know. I'm like, I've been playing this way for like 20 years, dude.
Yeah. No, I hear you, and that's the thing too. Like, I'm not trying to pick on the bros here. It's just this is their way they do things, and like, I do think it's an interesting play style, but I just think it's nice, it's refreshing, because you're to hear what you're saying, because it's just not usually talked about. People are just sort of like, they either, I guess, ignore it, and just sort of like grudgingly say, I like flex time, where like you're actually presenting a nice coherent argument, and it's nice, it's just refreshing that you even considered that with as a design choice, and one I agree with. But speaking of,
I may try to bend your ear more about this at some point, maybe away from the show, because one of the things that I think I find myself, I've never read Pendragon, that somebody brought it up in chat.
Yep.
And one of the things I find appealing about that, whether I would like the game or not, I have no idea. But one of the things I find appealing about that is building this long legacy. Like, that's so fantasy, ingrained in like fantasy literature. I just think that would be fun. And in one-to-one time, I'm thinking about doing a game that's sort of like a fantasy, they've just discovered the new world kind of thing, where it would take so long to have a colony and build that colony up. I might be doing 12-to-1 or 4-to-1. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I think actually this is an interesting topic. So like, even, and I swear Todd will get to talking more about Horde Wars, but even like the One Ring has that whole fellowship phase where you're done with the adventure and you've returned home, there and back again. And then there's the fellowship phase, which is exactly what you're talking about, Todd, like the season that goes by, and there's some downtime that happens, and then the next adventure, and I think there's something to that, and I think players do like that, and they want that. The one-to-one time certainly has its benefits, but I don't like you said, it breaks down after a while, the scaling issue. But anyway,
one related note, just from chat there, for generational play, absolutely tons of fun. It's something I've done in campaigns. I've had a single campaign world that went for about a half decade, two different like larger campaigns with two different sets of game masters. One of them went for about 2 years and was the first generation of characters, though that's not what we thought of it at the time. It was just the characters, right? But we had, I think, 3 game masters and probably about 20-ish, 25 players. And then the second kind of campaign in that had 2 game masters, and again, about the same player count. but we were playing the next generation of the characters, the heirs of those who had come before. But to do that, yeah, you've got to have you either have to skip some time, or you've got to have seasons or going by between sessions to actually get to the point where 30 years have gone by in the game world, and now maybe your original character is getting old, and maybe his son is now an adult and ready to take over things. Like,
yeah. I've never, I have a confession. I've never actually had a campaign do that. I've always wanted to do it. My little claim to fame, I guess, my little feather in my cap, I did have a 10-year long campaign, but it was total flex time, and it was the same characters on, like, it was an adventure path style game, so it wasn't like open world sandbox. Characters were on a grand quest kind of thing, and we would play for a little while, take a break, someone else wants to be a DM and run their thing, whatever, and then come back to it. But yeah, that originally I was hoping we would move into something like that, but my players were never into the domain play stuff. They just wanted to go and save the world, so that's what we did. Gaming online with people like you, Gary, is where I'm starting to see. I'm meeting people who are interested in that sort of
sure
thing. So, which has been nice.
Well,
So
one thing though that you can do with it with any play group really is introduce the idea of playing as a single family and its retainers who are trying to expand their power. Make that their power and influence. Make that
Agreed.
The core of the campaign. And even if they're not particularly into domain play, I think that you'll find the players will kind of naturally push towards it in the effort to achieve that goal. If they buy into the campaign concept of we're this minor
Right.
noble house trying to expand our power and influence, and that's the game. Yeah.
Have you had difficulty? So I'm convinced that if I were to tell a group of players we're going to play a game where you're all family, that a lot of, especially newish players, would just balk at that. They would just be like, I want to write my backstory. I want to be a fucking tiefling. You know what I mean? Like, have you ever had players push back on that, or?
Oh, well, it depends. A lot of times I'm presenting multiple options for the beginning of the campaign and going, which one do you guys want to play? For example, and generally speaking, I don't think it's the newer players. It'll be some players who have a little more experience who will push back. A newer player, generally speaking, if you're like, hey, come play this game with us, they're not even going to know some of those other options exist.
I need to correct myself. When I say newer player, I mean people who came in with the newest edition of Dungeons and Dragons. My apologies.
Yeah. So for that, I mean, it depends. So one of the times I did this kind of campaign, we had a noble house, and this was 3rd edition D&D or 3.5, and so the buy-in for the campaign was they all had to be part of this house or a retainer. So they all either had to be half or fully human, because the leader of the house was human, or if they were playing some other race, then they had to just be one of the retainers who was loyal to the house, and that was enough actually, as a rule. And so the upshot was, because I had some younger players. We had some, how can I phrase this? The conclusion was that the patriarch of the house got around. he had a half-elf kid and some humans and I think a half-orc.
That's great. That's great.
But that was fine. They bought in and had fun playing it. I think one player chose to play a retainer, and I think it was a dwarf. But otherwise, they all were like, "Yeah, I want to."
That's cool.
Do it. So
I think that
upfront.
Yeah, I've had ideas like that. Let's all be, all your characters be this family or be this or be that kind of thing. And for the most part, I've had players that have gone along, but there's always There's always that one guy, right? You really want him in your game, but he's not gonna do it. You know, he's just no, man. I don't want to do
Well,
it that way.
if they won't buy into the concept, they shouldn't be in the game.
Agreed.
Pretty simple.
Agreed.
If you want to
I
play a
agree with you.
game of, I don't know, pirates who are going to go raid for treasure and attack merchant ships, and that's the campaign. That's the idea. And you have a player who wants to play, I don't know, a member of the law enforcement agency who wants to capture all of you. Yeah, no, that's not going to work. That player can't be in that game. If he won't change, he could possibly participate as a fun opponent or NPC. You could possibly invite him to come in occasionally to come after the players, like Commodore Norrington in the Pirates of the Caribbean, the first movie. You could do that, but he won't be able to play as a pirate because he's chosen he doesn't want to play the game that you just offered.
Agreed.
So
yeah. Kind of switching gears here because we've been talking about domains and stuff, and I'm big on world building and whatnot. So going back to Horde Wars, looking at the map, and I know that was made by Patty's Parlor Games. Really nice map. Tell us a little bit about the world. I got a sense that there was heavily influenced by real world, like England and European countries. Was that by design? Like, what was your thoughts on that?
I mean, I enjoy reading history as much as I can. I try to read either primary sources or translations of primary sources because that's generally how you're going to get the best information. Especially when you get enemies of one another who write and agree about things, then that's probably what happened. Modern historians, how can I phrase this? Not all, but many modern historians project their own experiences and feelings on the past. One of the ways you can tell is that pretty much no modern historian in academia agrees with the people who were actually there when they talk about army sizes or casualty counts or the population of cities, the cities they lived in, the battles they fought. And so I think, and obviously sometimes a winner will exaggerate. That happens. But when you have the loser and the winner and even a third party all agreeing that the same thing happened or that the army was such and such a size, you should take the people who were there at their word. And a lot of modern historians do not. So
Yeah. Real quick, Disco Barbarian, another $5, man. Thank you so much. Your number one job as a player is to make a character to fit the campaign theme. Exactly. I am a big proponent of saying that the game master is a player too. They get to have fun as well, and they're not your slave. They're not there to do whatever it is that you want. You guys got to work together to come up with a cool game that you're all going to enjoy. So yes, I agree with that 100%. Going back to the history thing, though, I was just going to say what I see a lot is that, and this is a modern thing, and I know we're getting a little off the topic here, is there's no real data points to support their narrative. They're just sort of like, it sounds good, and they're sort of like taking these broad strokes about what's going on in history. And you learn a lot. Like I studied history in college, and we had a class dedicated to source material. One was secondary sources. That's stuff written by other guys about history. And then primary source material, which is the stuff directly from history, like a Roman general's treatise or something, right? And the primary source class was focused on the civil rights movement, which was really interesting to actually read what people were saying about their experiences at Selma, for example. And the thing that really kind of almost pretty much blackpilled me, and I came to the conclusion that you were just talking about, is when the teacher themselves was pointing out, had us read these like diaries and stuff, and you learned that Martin Luther King Jr. as much as he was talking about peaceful revolution and all this stuff, peaceful resistance, he had armed guards like everywhere he went. And so, like, if you tried to make a point, well, it wasn't as peaceful as you thought, and there were guys that were there carrying guns in like briefcases, they may not have been directly part of the movement. The teacher would be like, "Well, you can't talk about that."
Yeah.
It's just like, but that's an important point to make, though, about what was actually happening. So to bring it back to Horde Wars, I take it you were the stuff that you've been reading was really informing how you wanted to build the world, right? And did that in turn almost like kind of like a feedback loop inform the way you were going to design Horde Wars?
As far as the setting goes, we had pretty much the setting itself done when we released Basic. What we didn't have done were the site-based adventures, which you'll find in Advanced. So there's 24 adventure locations that 3 in each of the major nations that you'll get in Advanced, in addition to like 17 or 19 adventures for the sample starting area. But the setting, it's to kind of help show you, here's what this culture's like. And so we borrowed a lot from real history, and with some mixing and matching. Like you might say, well, Franconia, that's obviously France. Well, some of the laws are like France, but they also have horse archers, which France certainly didn't, and live on a giant prairie, essentially, which is not France. But there are some elements of that culture, sure, and we use some of the place names and that kind of thing. Mercia, same thing, is similar to, but not the same as England. There are definite differences, and a lot of times it's stuff that we borrowed from also from history. So, for example, we have a cultural tradition in Mercia that you burn wicker effigies to ward off witches. And this is, in real life, a Danish custom.
Right on. Okay.
So it's not that it doesn't exist. It's just that's not from England.
Right. Gary's reminding me, because I always forget to do this. Please hit like, subscribe, bell icon. If you're on Rumble, hit follow. Rumble's way more generous.
Just a small aside. You are like, you're almost at 1,000 followers on YouTube. And
that is true, yeah.
I keep telling Matt, chill, baby, chill. You got stuff.
I know.
Do what you got to do.
I'm here to. I
know.
Yeah, I know. I'm
proud of you, Matt.
I want to talk to
you. You got stuff. Let people buy it. And like and subscribe. God damn it. Sorry, excuse my language. I took the words name in vain. I apologize.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Horde Wars.
Okay. So
yes. Go ahead.
But so the inspiration, of course, is from medieval European history as much as we can. But we're technologically closer to the late Middle Ages or high Middle Ages, but the setting is more the Dark Ages, or the beginning of the medieval era. In that there's significantly less national unity, that there are large areas of kind of uncontrolled or unexplored or just ruined wilderness and this kind of thing. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a follow-up question then. And this goes to something, and I'm going to be actually making a video on this. I meant to do it this week, but my job hates me right now. I'm a believer, you're obviously familiar with the Appendix N from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm of the opinion game masters have their own Appendix N. And so I've been curious. I've been wanting to ask you this question. What is your Appendix N? What books, movies, music, art, whatever it is, what inspires you? And it sounds like history might be one of those.
Give you an example. When I was working on the content for the Crusades for Horde Wars Advanced, I read some firsthand accounts of Crusades that people went on. Some were short pieces, like a paragraph or two. Others are, like a full book, like The Life of St. Louis by John of Joinville. That was originally written in Middle French by a guy like in his 70s, but he was there in his 20s on a crusade, and he describes how it went. And it did not go well, incidentally. You should read the book. It's a good book, but he if you enjoy military history or strategy, you will know when things are about to go bad. Because when I was reading it, and I didn't know much about that particular crusade. When I was reading it, there was a point when I could go, "Oh man, they're all going to die."
Real quick, Ultra American TTRPGer, thank you very much. $5 super chat. Let me tell you about my halfling Viking tavern wench that faced a party of giants and died standing. Brought to you by Raid Shadow Legends. Thank you very much, man. So history books is there anything else, like movies or anything like that?
I when I was younger in particular, and I still do read a fair amount now. I think I finished less than I did. I think I finished 5 or 6 books in the last month, but I used to read even more, and I have pretty good reading retention, and so it would be hard for me to list all of the books that are inspiring me, but I would say that in terms of authors, Tolkien would be one. David Weber would be another. At least I think that's how you say it. Weber. Eric Flint. But also like the Iliad and the Odyssey. But incidentally, I like the Iliad much better than the Odyssey. I don't like the Odyssey as much, but I've certainly read it more than once, and it is an influence. And even just reading about how travel worked. Like I've read a bunch of firsthand articles, or not articles, letters, by a guy named Thomas Jackson from like the 1850s in the US. And travel technology at that point, since he wasn't mostly taking trains, was not terribly different from medieval travel. And it was interesting to read about just kind of him writing in letters, like to his sister or to other people, about traveling. Because at one point he actually goes to Europe. And it's a really, he's gone for, I forget how long it was, but something like 6 months, right? Because it's a very long voyage across the ocean. He's then there actually in Europe for probably about 3 months or more, traveling around, and then he's got to get home again as well.
On that point, actually, do you find then this just kind of came to me because you clearly are getting like real world, information that's kind of like feeding into your game and the way you approach things. Do you find like modern games, and not modern games like guns and cars and I'm playing a superhero, but I mean like the modern games that are being designed for fantasy, do you find them to be anachronistic at all?
Yeah, but some anachronism is fine because again, our game isn't meant to be historical, but it's definitely inspired by history. So, for example, we have potatoes. They did not in medieval Europe.
Fair enough.
And obviously, we've got fantasy races of various sorts. We used species because we do mean that they cannot breed usefully with one another, with a single exception. That in order to reproduce, they have to, like humans have to have human wives, and elves have to have elvish wives, and so on in order to have children. But yeah, I know D&D uses races. We don't mean flavors of the same species. We mean actually different species.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just I don't know why I've been on this lately, but like, I mean, I like Shadow Dark. I like it, but I really don't like how it's treated. And maybe be developed a little bit more with the new product she's putting out. But I really didn't like the way it handled like travel and what would happen if you like didn't have enough gear, food, or whatever. I just sort of felt like it was too hand wavy, too focused on the dungeon crawl, I guess. And yeah, this like anachronistic sort of way of approaching this part of the game, maybe because it's like it's be deemed boring. I think hex crawling in a dangerous environment is actually kind of interesting, even if it's not part of the main quest. And I know when I was doing research for Wretched Folklore, I read some interesting things about the Midwest when it was still in the early days when they were settling it. One of the more fascinating aspects of it was prairie madness, and I tried to create rules for that, and you'll find that in here.
I'm so
Because
proud of
people would go, I know I keep flashing it. I gotta stop. People are gonna call me RPG pundit. Anyway, but one of the more fascinating things about it was people were going out there, they'd settle, and aside from all the danger with like the natives, right, and disease, they'd be on their farms and they'd be going mad. And you would read these letters back home that were sent back home, and they would be focusing on the sound or the lack of sound or the ever-present wind. And someone, I can't remember where it was, but at some university, they did a study about sound and the absence of sound. And they surmised that it was so quiet out there that the sound of a chicken would be pronounced, right? Or the wind, when you hear the wind, it'd be so pronounced and like extra loud because your brain isn't filtering out all these other sounds that are kind of in the background. Because the moment they got electricity and the moment they started building cities, all that discussion in that primary source material went away. The prairie madness was gone, and that kind of thing like influenced my writing there. So I find this really fascinating. It's I did not know this about you, so I'm kind of fascinated.
That's fun. But yeah, no, I do occasionally get invited to talk with people about history. I've done I think 3 or so, maybe 4 streams with like the Greyhorn Pagans podcast. Now I'm a Christian. I'm not a pagan. I obviously disagree with them very much religiously, but they know that I read and study the past, and sometimes they just want to know an answer to a particular question. Like I've been invited on there to talk about like what's the actual historical evidence for King Arthur? Is there any?
Right.
Or of dragons being a real thing? Is there any evidence of that? And if so, what is it? And this kind of thing. So that's fun to be able to do once in a while. Same thing. I got invited to talk about the Black Death because I had read a translation of a primary source, I should clarify, from a guy who was in Constantinople during the Justinian plague, and that's really the first outbreak of the Black Death, and it was distinct. It had different characteristics, many the same, but some distinct characteristics that were not true later. And then the same is true of kind of the middle chunk of the Black Death, and then the later bubonic plague. That there were real differences, both in how it was transmitted and symptoms to an extent, as well as the lethality. The first one was essentially a death sentence. If you caught it, something like 99 out of 100 people would die. If you caught it, you were dead. Which wasn't true of the later ones that got less and less lethal over time, and this sort of thing. So getting to talk about that, but so we have a spoof of this plague in our game. We have the Gray Death, and it is actually a fungal infection where basically mold is growing inside of you and making you sick, and eventually, if you die well infected, your body will like have an explosion of mold out of it, infecting everyone nearby or potentially infecting them. So we tried to play around with that while not having it just be the same thing.
I love that, by the way. In my Lamentations of Elemental Evil game, one of my chosen themes is mushrooms because Zuckmoy, Demon Queen of Fungus, is in the middle of the temple, right? And then James Radji's got his own thing, and that's why I like put them all together. So mushrooms and fungus as sort of like an adversary has been like something I've been doing. So I saw that and I was like,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool. And I also like the body horror of it all. That's just something I'm into, like the horror gaming. So I really like that too. Let's get kind of circle back around. And I know you've answered this question before, but this is the first time you're on our channel, so I'm going to ask it. Why the D12?
Two reasons. One, it's underutilized. I mean that's a good reason right there, actually. But two, it let us make a game that is better in a specific way, which is that in two ways, which is that it plays faster because we can embed penalties in the dice rather than you having to do subtraction. We can simply have you roll a D10, D8, D6, D4 if you are like fatigued or exhausted or cursed or whatever. That plays faster, and it does matter the minutes saved over the course of a multi-hour game. And then the same is true for critical hits. We kept the max die roll as a critical hit. Well, on a D20, you've got a 5% chance. On a D12, you've got about an 8 1/3% chance. That may not sound like a big difference, but that's just enough that players will actually adjust their tactics with the assumption that they might crit. So if, for example, you have a weapon with a stunning effect or the ability to penetrate armor or what have you on a crit, the players will actually tactically cooperate to try to make it happen, which with a 5% chance, they won't do it. Why? I don't know. Something to do with human psychology, the limits of our memory, right? But that is reality. And if you don't believe me, try it. Do the exact same stuff with a D20 and a D12, and you'll notice a difference in player behavior. Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, and then since we're on crits, we're on D12, and you brought up crits, your crit damage is different in Horde Wars, right? Like that's been upped. I think it depends on the character you play, but it's like either double dice or double damage, don't you have
so
some?
It's double the total. And so depending on the weapon you're using, a penetrating weapon, for example, if you crit, will just ignore the protection by an enemy's armor. So you'll get through for full damage. A heavy weapon, if you crit, will roll an extra die, which is also multiplied on the crit. So a heavy weapon hits really hard at the crits.
Right.
Swords, which have the impact property, crit twice as often. They crit on an 11 or a 12. And so on. But also, yeah, we've done a lot with the math. My co-author is a math and physics professor. And so we have we've done a lot of things with the math to mechanically help the game play faster while actually increasing tactical depth compared to something like D&D. It also means that some of those things that we've done actually help the players pay more attention because most of them have the ability to act off turn once in a given round in some way. And so because of that, and this is something that we introduced early on, but our players actually asked for more of, our playtesters. So we designed more of that kind of thing. We found that the combat rounds go quicker, even though there's more stuff for them to do, because you don't have the players' attention wandering as much. Like they're actually paying attention to the combat, even not on their turn, because there's usually something they could do or could be getting set up to do. And if their attention wavers, they'll miss it. And that was something we discovered. That particular one wasn't by design. We discovered it in playtesting, but it did hold up. Like when we demo this, when we demo Horde Wars Advanced or Horde Wars Basic at conventions, people will come over not just because of the miniatures, but D&D and Pathfinder players will come over because they can see we're playing a similar style of game, right? It's a medieval fantasy game, but that our turns are going quicker, and the player characters are fighting like 4 times as many opponents as they are. And so they know and like they'll come over and comment that stuff to us, which is really interesting. The comment about how quickly the turn order is moving, or comment about how many opponents the player characters are fighting. And yeah.
Excuse me for 1 minute, gentlemen. Sorry.
Well, on that note, so I mean, you're talking about the ability to do something in the round, and focus it, basically having players almost forced to focus on the game, which is nice, right? Because we've all been there where players are doing whatever, they're grabbing more Cheetos or something. But that's the maneuver mechanic,
The
right?
maneuver mechanic is what I was describing. Yes. Also, how we do turn order helps.
And that is like basically whoever got initiative, and then he got to go around the table, right? Yeah. Yeah, Shadow Dark does that too, and I think that's smart, because I think sitting around, I mean, all right, everyone roll initiative, and then you got some guy with a book, right, writing in the notebook, like, what'd you get? What you get? Yeah, you're right. That was totally. I don't know why no one has started doing that sooner.
Yeah, well, because you lose several minutes of playtime for each combat if you do that. Just from preparing it, just from writing it down. And then you'll have the players who don't know when their turn is. If it's obvious to everyone whose turn is next, not only does it save time in the figuring out initiative order sense, but also it saves time in that the player is ready to act on their turn.
Right. I think that's another problem. Just I people blame 5e for this, but I think it's just a player thing. And you kind of touched upon psychology. You know, they got so many, they're looking at their character sheet, they're not 100% sure what they want to do. They haven't been paying attention, so when it does fall on their turn, they're like, well, I guess I'll use the spell, or wait a minute, maybe not. But I noticed, like when I was running Shadow Dark, you know, you're right. Like people know when it's going to be their turn, so they're ready. So we got a super chat and a question for you. Disco Barbarian, $2. Thank you very much, sir. How do you run 2-weapon fighting?
Well, pretty straightforward. Most people in real life are not 2-weapon fighters. I say that as someone who did security for many years, and that is reality. Whether or not one likes it in a fantasy realm, many people did get trained to be functional 2-weapon fighters, but often that would be a blocking weapon and an attacking weapon, like a dueling dagger or a shield or this kind of thing, paired with an offense-oriented weapon. That being said, we do have 2-weapon fighting. Essentially, all it does baseline is let you attack once with each hand instead of twice with one weapon. Now, that may not sound very exciting, and that's all right. Where it gets interesting is when you have somebody like a Blade Master who does that, who can follow up an attack with another attack, in which case the Blade Master is going to swing twice with one and once with the other. And then we also have weapons that, when you take the attack action, give you an extra attack. These are artifact weapons you can discover. So a maxed out, found the best weapons for them 2-weapon fighter in our game could, at high level, get up to 5 attacks a round, depending on the choices you've made. But the baseline is just you attack just as often as someone with a weapon who's trained at that weapon. It requires you to make other choices beyond just, I'm going to take the 2-weapon fighter feature.
Right. So kind of on that note too, this is a design thing that I've been wanting to ask you about too, about how characters are created. So you don't call them classes, they're like professions or archetypes, right?
Yeah.
And then you pick careers. That's it. Thank you. And you pick 2 of them. But what I thought was kind of interesting, I didn't see any I guess prohibitions from combining these careers. So you could have So you could have like a crusader, which is kind of like a paladin-y type because they have like these holy abilities, paired up with a red wizard. So he also has fight flame abilities. What was your thoughts behind that? I'm really curious about this.
So do you remember a Gestalt rule from D&D?
No, actually, I don't.
Well, it was a rule that existed in at least 2 editions of the game. I'm not sure how far back it went, but it basically was the idea that you could be 2 different classes at the same time. So rather than multi-classing, you'd be leveling up in both.
Oh, yeah, no, I know. Yeah, in second edition, demi-humans could multi-class, so they would, and then humans could dual class, where they stop and start over. And if I remember correctly, their first class, they couldn't use those powers until they exceeded the level of their second class, and then like your fighter mage. So if you were like a fighter at 5th level and then became a mage, you couldn't use your fighting abilities until you hit 6th level
Yeah,
mage.
well,
and then
it's fairly clear to me just from the comment that Disco Barbarian knows what I'm talking about. And let me make this very clear for that person, anyone else who's familiar with this rule. So we were playing 3-5 with almost all of the splat books allowed at the time. There were a couple that we didn't. And we were playing Gestalt, and I ran a campaign through 35th level for the lowest level character. I think the highest level character was 42. This was not a quick campaign. But my point is, I have no problem with really high level gaming. It can be a lot of fun. That was very complex. There was some effort involved in creating or finding appropriate opponents for the party. A lot of fun though. So I enjoyed that, but I didn't want that level of complexity. And yes, 2 classes at once, but we went all the way to really high level. So we liked that idea. Like, so I'd played with that a bit before, and then we were like, okay. We tried out classes, kind of like D&D does, where you've got like long progressions and stuff. We play tested that and didn't find that was nearly as fun for our players as if we took the same notion and split it up into 2 careers and basically shrunk the focus a bit and let them pick. That got some real traction in playtesting. And so we had some experience with the idea of Gestalt or multi-classing characters, but then we tried doing kind of what D&D does and found that it just wasn't actually as popular with our playtesters. They actually wanted to have kind of components you could choose. And by breaking them down into careers with an A and a B theme, for a knight, obviously riding horses is important in heavy armor, but also blocking with your shield is actually pretty important. You don't typically see, unless they're fighting other guys in heavy armor, you don't typically see the knights with 2-handed weapons. They will do it against opponents in 2-handed armor, or in opponents in heavy armor, or they'll take a 2-handed weapon against people in no armor. They'll also do that, but otherwise tended to be a sword and board or a mace or an axe or whatever it might be with the shield, or a lance with a shield, right? And so anyway, so we're like, all right, so that's what's important for a knight. Oh, what's important? What would be a crusader type or a paladin type character? What would be important for them? And well, the answer is the ability to kind of like to do holy damage in some fashion, to be able to cut through armor in some fashion, and also the ability to do a bit more crowd control. A crusader type is typically going to be outnumbered, and so we built a heavy armor career focused on those 2 things for the crusader. And then the same is true for like wizards. By having more than one variety of wizard, it lets us embed a way for you to get information on the setting, as well as for you to rapidly create your starting spell list. If you wanted to play, say, a red and a blue wizard together, you've got your first 6 spells done.
Right.
That's the end. If you bump into a red wizard in the world or a blue wizard in the world, even if you've never played our game, at least 3 of the spells that guy knows.
Right.
You have some information you can share with the party or can plan on. Anyway, so that was kind of why we did that was playtesting, and it took, I think, 3 or 4 iterations of playtesting to get to the system that we have now.
Wow.
But we chose to take our time. I think we spent in total something like half a decade playtesting this prior to creating our company and then going into development.
Wow, I didn't know that either. Interesting. So I guess, okay, so with the way you did the professions, the careers, that seemed pretty different compared to what you see in D&D. But I have a feeling I know the answer
Iron
to.
Kingdoms does something like that.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware. I've never played that one. But you kind of went with like the more traditional race choice. I think I know the answer to this, but why did you stick with like the more traditional?
Well, other than orcs, which you can play in our game, we differentiate those from goblins fairly strongly, which is just not the case in D&D. In D&D, they're basically the same thing.
Yeah.
But in one's just bigger.
Right.
But in our game, they are different. But we did that because we enjoy. Nate and I both enjoy classic fantasy. We enjoy medieval European fantasy, and the notion of little people like halflings or like dwarves, the notion of elves. These are actual. This is from European mythology.
Mm-hmm.
Heavily Norse mythology for a couple of those, but European mythology. And the same is true of orcs, though Tolkien perhaps was a little more detailed with the description than the original source material. This is all European mythology. And so a lot of our monsters are also from European mythology. Some of the beasts are. For example, a wyvern, not a real creature in real life. However, we do have that as a beast in Horde Wars. And this is a creature from folklore. The same is true of a manticore, although that type of monster is probably actually Persian rather than European in mythology originally. Anyway, so we took some time and just and that was the main consideration.
That's
Does that answer your
impressive.
question?
Yeah. I figured that was going to be the answer, actually. Sorry, go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm sorry, I just jumped in, but that 5-year playtesting is really impressive. I'm kind of curious. We've gone about an hour or so, and we've talked about Horde Wars, and a couple times you've mentioned this sci-fi game that you're looking at. First off, everybody, you can go to did we put the website up? You can go to the website. You can grab a copy of Horde Wars.
I'm going to put the link in the chat.
Soft cover, PDF.
Yeah. So blackwallgames.com. If you want to get a physical book, we do ship in the US only currently. If you're in Canada, get a hold of us directly because we live on a border state. So depending on where you are, we might be able to get you some books. But in general, shipping overseas is expensive. And until we have a certain critical mass of customers, it is not cost effective for us to do that because we would need local distributors or local warehouses or local printing facilities. Or, I mean, I guess if you want to pay the insane shipping rates, you can, but almost no one wants to do that.
Right. So I'm curious, you piqued my interest real early on when you mentioned this sci-fi project that you're doing. And just out of curiosity, is it based on the Horde Wars rules? Is that, or is it a completely
we started developing that first, actually. We started working on the sci-fi game. Horde Wars resulted from Nate being out of town for 2 weeks and we were struggling with character abilities, and so I tried switching genres to fantasy to work on character abilities for the sci-fi game, but thinking about it in a different genre to help spark my brain. And so I wrote about half of the core system for Horde Wars, not all the monsters and setting and stuff, but the mechanical chunk, while he was gone. And when he got back, I showed it to him. We brought it to a playtest group, and we ran that playtest I told you about. And our playtesters liked it so much, we had some other groups try it as well, that we decided to develop that first. That said, the sci-fi game is we plan to have it done about this time next year.
That's cool.
It's called Dropship. We have an artist actively working on it. As I mentioned, I was working on rewriting the ship repair rules right before this stream, actually. We had so basically we had good solid space combat rules, but the thing we were struggling with was the character scale rules. And so Horde Wars very much reflects what those character scale rules are going to look like for the sci-fi game. Uses the same core engine, same idea for when how actions work, uses a D12, has careers. Durable objects are treated a bit differently because in a world with high explosives and plasma weapons, a stone wall is just not going to be quite as useful.
Right. Yep. I do find that with those games that, and something I'm interested in seeing in yours is there does seem to be a scalability issue that really comes in to a lot of games when you start doing. I mean, obviously, vehicles are going to complicate things a little bit, and I think most people are okay with that as long as the rules are sound. You know, it makes sense. But there is this whole scalability thing that I think is hard to crack. I do think it's a hard nut to crack, you know?
Yeah. Oh, and to answer Chubby Futster, actually, most of the time, that was an exception. Most of the time, I get more done when I'm working with someone else, even if it's just someone looking at what I've written and telling me if they understand it, or if they have questions, or if it sounds stupid. I actually get more done usually that way. Every once in a while, though, the reverse happens where I got something in my head that I just need to get out on paper. But most of the time, it's more of a grinding process than just spilling out.
I like to call those moments puking on paper. You're just like, get it out. I'll make it look nice later. Just bleh. Real quick, because I know you're talking about the sci-fi thing, and I'm kind of curious because that's like a whole nother animal in my mind, sci-fi. Is there, I know you mentioned some issues with like how to deal with like the character level stuff, but was there anything just more generally speaking about developing a sci-fi game that you found particularly challenging?
Yeah. Again, in playtesting, we found that it is a bad idea. I'm going to say this in general, in sci-fi, to have players play sapient aliens. It's a bad idea. There are exceptions, perhaps, but in general, because we're all actually humans who are playing these games, if you have alien civilizations as antagonists in the game,
right,
it is very difficult for the players to how to phrase this, be a united faction or crew or group in a setting where there are alien kind of nation states or empires existing around the galaxy, and the players are all from different ones, all the player characters. Whereas if all the player characters are human, even if humans are infighting with each other, we found that the players are able to stick together far better. and are able to interact with aliens not more efficiently, more believably, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It's really clear also that they're generally speaking having more fun. So we tried out having playable aliens. We'll probably include either an unofficial supplement or buried in the back of the book the option to play aliens, but the default, because of some of the issues we saw, the default is going to be you're going to be playing one of a few flavors of human for the player characters, which is not what I expected. I expected the opposite when we went in,
Right.
but no, actually, it is based on playtesting and hearing from other people and reading other sci-fi games. Yeah, having players be all the flavors of alien is a bad idea. The exception would be something like a Star Wars type galaxy, where really most of the different alien races or species are just kind of part of the larger empire or the larger republic. They're not themselves factions. I think in that kind of setting it can work. But that is definitely not the setting we want. We want a setting that is
that's a
somewhat
very
close.
space opera. Yeah, it's a very space opera action adventure, which is I love. There's some Star Wars games that I love, but I don't even know if they're science fiction as much as they're science fantasy space opera. What flavor do you think this is going to wind up being? Like, does it cater to? Sorry,
I was just
my
about
bad, Matt.
no. I was just about to ask that. So go ahead.
Right. So are we talking like a Star Trek flavor, Alien? What is your, Warhammer? What's it going to be, bro? What are you doing?
Oh, let's see. Starship Troopers or Warhammer.
Nice.
Lots of not necessarily just insects as opponents. That'll exist,
right.
But all different alien. Basically, we want humanity to be in a position where there is some internal human politics, there is some internal human infighting, but alien civilizations are an existential threat and want to carve up human territory like Europeans carved up Africa.
Gotcha.
The aliens want to take over.
Have you played Helldivers? Will I be able to call in artillery strikes?
Yep. Yes.
All right.
We do.
There we go.
You can. XCOM would be another example where aliens are an existential threat. Mass Effect, not as much, because there often you have aliens who are your friends. Here, aliens are not your friends. They want to conquer, exploit, or exterminate you. So military focused in terms of where you'd be playing members of like a Marine Corps, or where you'd be playing members of like a Space Navy, essentially. But where the option to play civilians, and how we're going to present that option is one of the things Nate and I are still exploring, because we could either offer that as a supplement, because it's not the main game. The main game is really this existential crisis. All these alien species invading basically at once from all different directions, and handling that. But also, but we might also just do that as a separate chapter in the same book and go, if you want to play civilians, here's what you would do differently. But the main focus would be the kind of Space Navy and Space Marines type thing. Though we have to be careful with the terminology, because Games Workshop is illegally appropriating that term.
Yeah, good old
they didn't think of it.
Companies.
That goes back to the 1930s.
So, yeah, I really
this made me laugh.
Second, yeah. As someone with an ex-wife, my second or third love when it came to role-playing games was Star Wars D6, and up until probably, it was just fun, especially when you're a kid and you get to roll like 2 handfuls of dice. You know what I mean? It was a lot of fun. And regardless of like all the garbage that the movies have become, I was one of like 5 people to even enjoy the Star Wars Fantasy Flight game with the funny dice that everybody complains about. I'm that guy. But I find that you kind of have to do either the military or the civilian, and the civilian really just becomes smugglers and bounty hunters, and they have ball. It's almost the same, when you really get into it. It almost becomes the same game to some extent. So I don't know. I mean, don't take my advice. I've never published a game, but I would say when it comes to civilians, maybe hold off, because it's a different style of play. I think, because they've got spaceships, they can just leave. They don't care about your plans. They don't care about your campaign. They're just like, we're gonna go here.
Well, that's so. I think it can work in that you've got this existential threat that civilians at some point are going to be forced to deal with the aliens, because the aliens are slowly conquering human space. So if you don't choose to interact with that at some point, you're going to start losing like allies and safe locations and places to hide out because it's been conquered now. And so I think it can work. We just have to think about how to present it. And if there's enough material that it should be its own separate work. Yeah. But the main intent is really focusing on the military aspect. And I think that'll be really fun, because this is, squad or small fleet based tactical play as well as a role playing game. I think war gamers will get into it, actually.
What this discussion is. Oh yeah, I know.
You gotta go easy on me, bro.
This dude's lighting it up tonight, man. So this discussion is actually reminding me of the Alien RPG from Free League, because they have like 3 different types of groups that you can play, and the one obvious one and the first one that they really expanded on was the military campaign, which I felt was actually the weaker, because it's alien and it's really should be horror, sort of trying to survive. And when everyone's shooting guns at the xenomorph kind of loses its luster. But they do have like the space trucker kind of like concept, which is from the original book or movie Alien. And I think that works really well. So, but it is a different perspective, right? You're not these guys who know how to fight. You might know how to kind of fight, but not like a military guy. You don't have that level of discipline. So I think it can work, but you're going to be looking at it from a very different perspective. So I'm curious, and I'm curious to see what you do with it, because that sounds interesting. I am, of course, though, biased. I like my sci-fi horror. I like all horror. I mean, that's what I like to do. Scare the shit out of my players. But yeah,
I don't want to be scared.
I'm curious. You'll have to let me know when you give that a try with Horde Wars, because there are some monsters in there they will not have heard of. One of which is just funny to me, is the siren snail.
I saw that.
I have used that, and the party of playtesters was so, and this included like Raven Wolfgar, Victor Gorbachev, Likely Arrow, John from Terminal Goblin Games, and a few others. It was so they got one-shotted as a party by one blast from the siren snail. I think one player was healthy, one was at 1 hit point, and the other 3 or 4 characters were bleeding out. Jeez. And they were just like, run, we're out of here. Some of them wound up dying, and they did revive 1 or 2 of them. And anyway, they wound up dealing with that. But the next time that some of the same players encountered a siren snail, they refused to engage. Like, they were on we were playtesting the nautical rules for advanced at this point, and they had sailed to an island and found the island like deserted, and they were exploring it, and basically it was a horror game. There was this invisible creature that was like draining the life and moisture out of its victims. And so they were like, "Oh no, that's we should leave." And then they realized the harbor entrance that they'd sailed through had siren snails at it. They're like, "No, no, we're staying. I would rather have the."
Yeah, we'll face the invisible life draining thing rather than those snail. That's funny. That's funny. Yeah. So, well, I know you were talking about a lot of your monsters and whatnot come from folklore, but you also have a lot of unique ones. And obviously you've been playtesting them. Did you find the unique ones had more, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Emotional punch is not accurate, but I guess had more, was more significant, had more of an impact on the players. Because I've Lamentations of the Flame Princess is one of my favorite games. He does not have a bestiary because all the monsters are unique, horrifying things that the characters have to experience. So did you find that when you introduced things like the Siren Snail, it had more of an impact as opposed to like these more traditional monsters that are we see in D&D, we see in some of these other games?
Yeah, but we do some things with the traditional monsters that a lot of games don't. So we just kind of assume that the reader knows what a zombie is or what a goblin is, broadly speaking. And if they don't, the internet exists. It's not hard to check.
Yeah.
But that most customers are going to be aware of these kind of common ideas. What's an animated skeleton like? Isn't probably something that we have to tell them. So instead of spending a paragraph or two to explain about each of these monsters, and many of which are familiar ones, because of the genre. Instead, we've embedded in them a behavioral reward. So for zombies, for example, they get to do an extra die of damage to whoever they're attacking if there's another one of their allies next to you. So zombies are actually incentivized to swarm. We don't actually tell you to do that, but with just that little mechanical incentive of flanker, the game masters will to try to maximize the monster, will start surrounding the players. And whereas like we have ambusher types who do an extra die of damage during the first round of combat, so they're incentivized to sneak up on you and take you out quickly. We have other ones that behave like a warbull or like a rhino type that get bonus damage for like charging at you, for running in a straight line and then attacking. Or other ones, we had a little fun with Jurassic Park reference. Our Tyrannosaurus Rex does an extra die of damage if you've moved.
Nice.
Like this kind of thing. But the embedding that in a lot of the stat blocks, I think, really helps the game come to life, but also helps it feel new. And some of them are like strictly bad traits. Most of them are good traits, but like the goblins have one called Goblin Greed, where essentially whenever they see treasure, they have to roll a willpower check or they're going to run towards it. So the players, as soon as they figure this out, will do stuff like chuck coins down a well and see how many goblins they can get to dive in.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, so that kind of thing, I think, really is quite fun, but it also helps even a more traditional monster feel more interesting or more dangerous.
What do you think when you talk about these little details that you add in? I'm kind of curious, like, were those things that evolved during your game? Or did you just think, well, we need to make goblins different? I mean, I guess what I'm saying, you had 5 years of playtesting on this. What, compared to what you wrote, compared to what the game is now, how much did it change? How much did the monsters change? What's the big difference?
I mean, we had to develop all the monsters, right? We had to get those stat blocks. The first ones I tried statting out were goblins, and then they've changed since then, of course. But the playtesting helped with that a lot. When it came to the player abilities for Horde Wars, once we had the initial draft, we had about 6 careers that did not make the cut for various reasons. 4 of which were because they were explicitly evil. I don't mean that you can't play like a bad or a morally gray character, but I mean that you had to be evil to do the thing the career was doing. Like you could be, theoretically, you could be a good assassin. You could assassinate murderers or dictators who are into genocide or whatever it might be. You could be a good or morally gray assassin. That's possible. However, if your career is like focused around cursing people and desecrating the dead, you can't really be a good guy. It's not So we did play around with those careers and tested them, and ultimately found that it was too divisive for a party, so those didn't make the cut. And then we had a few careers like the Wolf Brother. We had like a charioteer or gladiator one where we were playing around with it, and it was like, this doesn't quite fit the genre. They're pretty fun, but some of the material from those made it into the game. Like some of the evil careers we tested come out as monster abilities, or for like some of the evil cultists or this kind of thing. And then the like the gladiator and like charioteer stuff, you'll find that in our game, but like as a feature or as something like that you can pick or an enemy might have, rather than being one of the careers. So there were, and the Wolf Brother actually just became 2 features rather than being a full-on career. We found that the people who wanted pets that they could control in battle, most of the time, the thing that they really wanted was the equivalent of like a raven or a dog. Whereas the career we had made was like trying to push that more and more and more and more powerful, but that's not really what they wanted. They just wanted a cool pet who would be of some utility. And we're like, well, we can just make a feature for that, and then anyone could do it. You know, you could play a wizard with a pet owl or whatever if you want to. Anyway,
Pets.
so hopefully that answers your question. So I'd say a lot of the core stuff, those ideas stayed in there, but got refined over time.
Yeah. Did your mechanics, did the mechanical aspects of the game, did they change much from conception to publication?
Yeah. In that we had the much more limited amount of them, and our playtesters requested more, and so that changed. So now pretty much every career has a maneuver. It just depends. You might not start with it. Some of them get it at higher level. But this was because of playtest feedback. I think a lot of people who write games, a lot of companies even that write games, simply do not do enough playtesting. I'm not saying you need to spend half a decade on it. We didn't need to. Part of what slowed us down was COVID. And part of what slowed us down was me having my leg crushed. So I was out of commission for a bit.
Ouch.
That being said, so you don't really need that long, but you should take the time. And you can tell a lot of times with Wizards of the Coast, with Dungeons and Dragons, especially with like their splat books, it's often very obvious they didn't play test the content, especially when using the rules within the same book causes a game-breaking problem. There was one they released in some years ago that basically, if you were clever and chose the right options, you could make a character who wouldn't die of hit point loss at like level 3.
Oh wow!
Which is not what they intended. But it was simply going, oh, I can pick this barbarian option, cool, and then I can get this other thing. And when I make these 2 rules interact in the way that you wrote, oh, I just don't die to hit point loss. Okay. Yep. It's not what they intended. They weren't thinking about this, but that's because they never actually, or if they did play test it, they didn't test it enough. They never had enough play testers to look at it and experiment with it and go, hey, this seems pretty busted, guys.
Right.
And the same is true for like redundant terminology. They'll use the same words to mean very different things for feats or abilities of various sorts. And you can tell there was no central planning. No one went, Let's check if we've done this before. The Hexblade being an example, they printed 2 or 3 different ones that were different. What's the word I'm looking for? Not career. Class. Different classes in the exact same edition of the game.
Right.
Like they weren't mechanically the same. They had the same name, but they weren't. And the same was true of the Samurai. They printed at least 2 different ones.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Like just dumb stuff like that. Like that if anyone had, if they had done a more thorough job of playtesting or thinking about what they'd already done, these are just sloppy mistakes.
All right, man. So we are at 10 minutes, and I know that you're out doing the con thing. I think we're going to bump into you at North Texas. Tell us, where are you going? What you doing? What's next for Horde Wars? Should people be looking out for new product? What? Do your thing, man.
Yeah, so we are planning to be at a number of private conventions, but as far as publicly accessible ones, there is Nova Open in Washington, D.C. That is Labor Day weekend. If you live on the East Coast or around in and around Washington, D.C., I definitely encourage you to go there. The con's about 3,500 to 4,000 people, but they have only recently expanded into including role-playing games. They're primarily a wargaming convention, but that area has a bunch of fun games of different kinds. Nate and I are set up to run, I think, 10 games at that convention over the course of 3 days. And then we're running 9 games at North Texas RPG Con. I believe North Texas is sold out, other than possibly for day passes. However, they also sell passes at the door. So if you want to go, you can totally just show up.
That's what we're counting on. I think we're booking a hotel in a few days, and we're just like, oh, let's hope those door passes are there.
Yeah. We literally, I got back from a vacation because my plan was go on vacation in February, come back, and like the very next day buy the badges, and it was like they sold out the day before. While I was on a plane, and I'm like, son of a. But I was talking to some of the guys on their Discord server, and they're like, hey man, yeah, just show up. It's cool. Come find us. And the first time I went to North Texas Con, I didn't have an advance pass, and I had a blast. And I'm like, okay, cool. So
yeah,
fingers
crossed, we're gonna be able to get into some games and stuff and enjoy.
Oh, you should be able to. I've got space in a few, and if not, I've talked to some of our customers out that way, and we're probably going to do a game or 2 off book as well. So cool. It shouldn't be a problem. And actually, if you guys know Matt from Black Lodge Games at all, there is a game he's signed up for right now that no one else has signed up for. I anticipate being able to fill it, but if you do have your pass for North Texas RPG Con, you should sign up for that game. If not, I'll be filling it with whoever we have pop by our game table at that time.
I would be happy to sign up, but I will be buying my tickets at the door. So I will.
We're basically going to show up. We're going to show up and then check whatever's available the day of. And if there's nothing available, we'll just go visit. Cause like I said, I'm a big fan of Lamentations. I want to go meet James Raggi, get him to sign one of my books, maybe bend his ear, because I have a couple ideas I'd like to pitch him. But we'll definitely be seeing you there. That'll be fun.
Yeah, and with that, Friday is going to be the most open. So if you're someone who's thinking about driving up to North Texas RPG Con, show up Friday in particular, because that has the most games available. So if you were just going to be there for a day, pick that day. Most of our games are near full. In fact, they would be full, except that they made a slight error and added an extra seat for all of our games, which is fine. I can run with 7 at the table too. It's whatever. But the Friday ones are the ones that are the least full. And I checked, and that was why. It's probably like half the games for the convention are set up for that day.
Wow. Yeah.
Something goofy like that. And then, yeah, beyond that, for Horde Wars, what's next? We are continuing to sell and market Horde Wars Advanced. Basic is also still available. But our goal, if possible, is to double the number of sales we had for Horde Wars Basic. The reason for this is Nate and I want to make a game company that's going to be here to stay, that's going to be around for a while. And if you like Horde Wars, you're going to like our other games. We are working on several others. We're also working on a superhero genre game. But that'll be a later project. We've done some play testing, we've done some development on it, but our cost estimates to bring that to market are about $35,000, and we are unwilling to spend that on an unproven concept at this point. So anyway, so we're continuing to sell Horde Wars Advanced, and I encourage you, if you haven't tried it, check it out. If you are worried about the expense, you can get Basic for like $7, $5 when it's on sale as a PDF. If you want to just kind of try it out, but it's a really fun game. And if you don't believe me, Black Lodge Games put out a video like this week. Those guys are playing our game. They were already customers when I sent them a couple books for review. They were already playing our game, and so if you want to hear current testimony from our players, you can check it out there. Same is true if you just do a Google search. You'll see blog entries by like Brown Wizard Winston and a bunch of other people talking about them trying our game and loving it. In Winston's case, he switched entirely from playing 5th edition D&D to playing Horde Wars. And then we've got people who have never played RPGs who have tried our game as their very first one, which has been really cool to see.
Well, very cool. We got just a few minutes left. I just want to open it up. Does anybody in chat have any questions for Blackwall? We'll have to wait a few minutes as they come trickling in. But in the meantime, hey, thank you so much for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. It's been eye-opening. There's some, I've seen you around various servers and whatnot, but I never really had a chance to chat with you. So getting to know you was definitely fun. Get a better idea like what goes into the game and the way your thought processes are, because that's what we do here. We're about game mastering and playing these games and having fun with these games. I think you get the most out of your game and improving your game by having these types of conversations, as opposed to watching some video and someone dictating to you about 1-to-1 time, for example, right?
Yeah.
So we definitely like and that's what we're doing here on the Second Watch. And before Gary yells at me, make sure you hit like and subscribe, bell icon. If you're on Rumble, if you're on Rumble, hit a follow, because they're way more generous with the ad money. Not that we're making any money yet, but we do appreciate all the super chats. Thank you very much, everyone.
I do see one question. What's the cheapest hard copy? The cheapest hard copy would be a copy of Horde Wars Basic. Those are typically sold for $35. And that is levels 1 to 4 and the relevant monsters and gear for that level. If you want if you're talking the full game, which is Horde Wars Advanced, you don't need Basic if you buy Advanced. It'd be $50 for a soft cover. It's $70 for a hard cover. We ship only in the US currently. A PDF you can get for $20 or $7 respectively.
And it is a very thick book.
Yeah, it's a 300-page book, and it is occasionally you'll catch a sale though. I think the lowest price we've put Advanced at has been $40 for a physical copy. So you might be able to catch a sale as well. For my ear trumpet, how easy is it to use Horde Wars with the Homebrewed World? Very easy. You would just need to go and take Horde Wars Advanced, look through the skills chapter, and make sure that you have your Homebrew World's version of what those skills do. So, for example, we have some cultural events, you'd want your own equivalent, or we have like setting languages, you'd want your own equivalent, or nations of the world, you'd want yours, right? But yeah, very easy. If you've got any experience with home brewing at all, it should be pretty straightforward. And if you're wondering, if you're a first-time game master and you're wondering, how do I run games? We don't tell you how to, but we do model how to in our sample adventure. And then we give you other samples of how you might prepare.
Right.
Without
and that's
no lecture, just here's some content to use.
Right. Another thing I wanted to mention is on your website. I don't know. I'm assuming it's still there. You guys had a link or an invitation to a Guilded server.
Yeah. So when
my
you buy our
understanding is
game,
that your Guilded server is pretty active, correct?
Yeah. So when you buy our game from our website, you'll be emailed an invite to our Guilded server. If you choose to buy digital from another website like DriveThruRPG, you will have to get a hold of us. DriveThruRPG will not let us send you an invite, so you'll have to get a hold of us with your order number and say you want to join.
I hate that company.
It's yeah. But that's just what's going on there. So buying through our website is better for us and is better for you, in that you can get the invite and that we actually get the money from you, as compared to drive-throughs like 35% cut or whatever it is. Yeah. And for and Al or Ed or both, Al, Ed, I will, dropship we should have out, like I said, around this time next year, or ready to be out. It really, for those of you not familiar working with printers, there can be delays because on the printing company side, with them being able to produce a good proof that we can't control. So that's why I say this time next year, give or take a couple months. We'll probably be ready then. But the question will be if the printing company or companies that we use are also ready.
Right on. All right. Well, we have hit the 2 o'clock mark for me. It's 2 o'clock for me, 2 a.m. Again, Blackwall, thank you so much for being here. Everybody, chat was great. We had a great time tonight. And I guess our watch has ended. So we will see you guys next week. Next week, we're just going to do a chill stream. We want to hear from you. We're going to talk about, Gary and I are going to talk about plans for the future. So, all right. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great weekend. Happy Easter. And see you later.
Later.